Ken Chodesh Tov. Ayin Tet Amud Aleph in Masechet Shabbat, the top of the page, Rav Amar. Now, the Gemara today is going to have two sections. The first, we're going to finish what we were discussing yesterday. Hayalanu Machloket Rav Yehuda v'Chachamim legabe shtar paruah, that he paid up. So his Machloket, does it have chashivut after it was paid up? So ata chayav lo'otza or lo? So we gave two ways of explaining that Machloket yesterday, Rav Yosef v'Abaye. V'ayom we're going to give two more ways of explaining, which is Rava v'Ravashi. Sant Hashem. The second section we're going to deal with is Amarnu b'Mishnah or kedei la'asot kemeya. Or how much or to be chayav? Kedei la'asot kemeya. So we're going to discuss exactly, there's different types of leathers, and we're going to discuss exactly what is the measure for leathers, whether they have been me'ubad, they have not been me'ubad.
How do you call kama in English?
Amulet. Different shiurim we'll get to, we'll see there's a standard and then there's some exceptions to it, Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so before we go ahead, let's just remember where we're holding, because we're a little bit in the middle of a discussion. Ayalanu machloket ba'in chet amud bet in Sofa Amud. We said, machloket b'shtar paruah. What did the Braita say? So the Tanakama said, hamotzi shtar chov, ad shelo para'o chayav, mishepara'o patur. So if he already paid it, patur. Lama ata patur? There's no chashivut. There's no chashivut. So if you carry it, you shouldn't carry it. But if you do, you're patur. Rabbi Yehuda said, even if it was paruah, it was already paid, you're still going to be chayav because you need it. So we were trying to figure out what exactly is the machloket. Okay. So we had Rav Yosef and we had Abai. Let's just speak out the two pshatim we said so far. Rav Yosef's pshat was, machloket is, do you hold asur l'shaot shtar paruah in your house or not? Rabbi Yehuda holds it's mutar l'shaot shtar paruah in your house, and memela the malva can use this as a latzor pitz lochit. He can use it for a bottle cover. Tanakama said asur, and therefore he has to get rid of it also. Memela, since he has to get rid of it, he can't benefit from it. And as we explained, the love, the borrower, doesn't want to keep it bichlal because maybe it'll fall out of his hands and then the malva will get his hands on it again. Okay, so that was the way that Rav Yosef explained. Abaye is the second pshat. Abaye said, everyone holds it's asur to keep this in your house. What was the debate? So this was very interesting. Abaye learned the pshat and the Braita a little different. Pshat and the Braita was not, this was not a normal situation. You had edim, no. This was a case where it was the loveh himself who said, look, there's a shtar v'ani ayiti chayav lecha, aval gam ani shilamti lecha. So the machloket is, Tanakama holds pesha sawa pesha yitir, and therefore he's not chayav. Since he's not chayav, the document is worthless. The malva can't collect with it. Fine. Therefore he can't keep it and he has to get rid of it. Fine. The Rabbi Yehuda holds, no, we only say that he can make it asur, meaning he can make himself chayav, but not that he can exempt himself. So memela, the malva does have value in this, and that's why he'll be chayav for carrying on Shabbat. Achshav, let's go to Rava's answer. Rava is the third answer. Rava says the third answer. Really, everybody agrees, if the lov is said, this shtar was written up. Shetzarich lekaimo. Really, everybody agrees he would have to validate it. Mazot, what does it mean he would have to validate it? Dahainu, v'im hu amar lo, ani shilamti et zeh, ata lo yochol legvot im zeh. Dahainu, kulei alma modi per she'asar hu ha per she'itir. So afilo Rabbi Yehuda modeh that the love cannot collect with this document, the malva, cannot collect with this document because the love is believed to say ani shilamti. Dahainu, if it was only al piv, he wouldn't be chayav. And therefore Rava says, that's not the pshat. And Rava therefore says, that's not the pshat in the Braita. That's not the case. The case of the Braita is there was regular edim on a regular shtar chov, the regular situation like we've been discussing. Not like Abaye is saying, Abaye had to learn differently in the Braita. No. Regular shtar chov that was brought out in front of us. There were regular edim on the shtar chov, and
So למטה,
one second. So
why
what's
אין
the
בשטר?
We'll get to it in a minute.
There's no חשיבות for that?
One second. But it's not the pshat like Rava was, like Abai was saying. And also Rashi throws in very important. Everybody also agrees, Asor l'shahot shtar paruah b'toch beito. Now I want to explain this outside and then we'll see it inside. The machloket we're going to have here is based on something I mentioned yesterday. When I pay up the shtar chov, what are you as the malveh required to do with the shtar chov? Ma chiyuv shel malveh im shtar chov?
To destroy it.
Oh. So there's a machloket in a different masechta.
If you should keep it or
Baba
destroy it.
Batra, Kuf Ayin Amud Bet. If kotvin shover or lo kotvin shover. What's the machloket?
Like a receipt.
So it's a very interesting machloket. Exactly. Can the malveh say to the loveh, I don't want to return to you the shtar chov. So instead...
יוחאי, שים בהשתק בבקשה.
He's here. Okay. Okay. Hello. So, can the lender say to the loveh, I don't have to return to you the shtar chov. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a receipt for you.
בוא.
אתה שומע מחלוקת?
בדיוק איתך.
If you have to write a receipt.
Batra. Can the malveh say to the loveh, אתה שילמת לי, ברוך השם. But I don't want to return to you the shtar chov. אני רוצה לכתוב שובר. Which is a receipt, and you have to hold on to the shover. Could he say that or not? Or can the loveh say lo? אני רוצה השטר.
According to what you're saying here, it
Now
was an issue.
before we see how it fits over here, let's just understand for a second what are the tzadim here exactly. What would you prefer? מה היה עדיף לך?
I prefer the shtar.
למה?
Because without the shtar, you have no way you can approve anything. You know, you can ask. When you have the shtar...
Say more, even more than that. Say more.
Without...
What are you going to do with the shtar?
I'm going to destroy it.
You're going to destroy it, that's for sure. But what's even more than that? If he gives
you... can demand more money,
it's
even
not
though they
better,
paid.
More.
It's not better proof that I pay you if I have the shtar.
אם הוא נותן לך שובר or seat, כן? What are you going to have to do with that shover for the rest of your life?
To hold it for all
your life. You're going to have to keep it.
No.
So the problem
I don't want the
is,
responsibility.
it puts responsibility
Forget
on
it.
I don't want האחריות הזה. I would prefer, what would I prefer?
I want the shtar himself.
Give me the shtar, I'll shred it in my shredder, and then zeo, that's the end of the story. If you give me a receipt, עכשיו אני צריך לשמור על הרסיט, because you might come and collect from me a different time.
Little bit more headache.
This is machloket. Can the malveh give him shover or not give him shover? That's the machloket.
But who is depend who? Who make the decision, yes or not?
It's machloket. It's machloket.
He can give him a shovar, but also can give him the...
If you give him the stars, I need the shovar.
Okay, let's say the malveh claims, that's how we're going to tie it in over here. Malveh claims, I don't know where the shtar went. I לא יודע איפה לאן הלך
No, אבל אם יש לו שובר, מה זה משנה?
So 1 second, that's the machloket. So the case we're going to have is like this, Rav is going to explain the machloket. The case was as follows.
But it's like you have a flight ticket and you used it before.
The loveh came to the malveh and he told him, here's the money. There was a normal shtar, regular case of a shtar, seder. He paid him up the money. And there were edim. Normal edim, normal chiyuv, regular case. Look, malveh said, Rega, I don't know where the shtar is right now. I'm going to give it back to you soon. Loveh trusted him. Fine, no problem. Malveh's looking around. He can't find the shtar. He can't find it.
Okay.
עכשיו ככה. If you hold kotvin shover. Shover or shovar? מה היית אומר?
שובר.
Shovar. It's interesting. The art scroll says shover. לא יודע. If you hold kotvin shovar, Ken, you could write a receipt. Okay? Is there chashivut to that shtar?
לא.
דהיינו, let's say accidentally, the malveh went out on Shabbat with that shovar, okay?
לא.
Is there chashivut to that shovar? To that shtar chov, the shtar chov. למה לא?
כי כבר נתת לו משהו שהוא...
אתה שילמת לי.
That's a proof for the payment.
אתה שילמת לי, let's speak it out. אתה שילמת לי, you paid me. And how do I get you off my back? אני רק צריך לכתוב שובר וזהו, לסוף הסיפור. And if I find the document later, I'll get rid of it, etc. So if I accidentally carry that shtar chov, I'm the malveh. I carry it on Shabbat, what's the halacha?
לא חייב.
אני פטור.
למה?
אני פטור. אין
לזה
לזה
חשיבות.
חשיבות.
למה?
כי נתת לו שובר.
How do I get you as the love off my back? אני רק צריך לכתוב לך שובר.
אוקיי.
And then you can't claim anything else from me. זהו.
אז השובר הוא
So
חשוב.
there's no...
No, one
עצם.
second. You are the מלווה,
אני המלווה ואתה לווה.
אני הלווה. אוקיי. I'm
אתה
come to
בא-
say,
אתה
listen,
בא אליי and you paid me and you said, אני רוצה השטר. אוקיי, אבל עכשיו, לפי התנקמה, that's how we're going to speak it out, תנקמה סובר, כותבים שובר. מה זאת אומרת? Even if I don't give you back the shtar, I can write you a receipt, and that's סוף הסיפור.
פתרת את
נגמר
השטר.
הסיפור.
אוקיי.
ועכשיו, am I חייב? No, זהו. You paid me, I don't owe you the ועכשיו, the shtar is meaningless. Why?
the shtar
Let's
is
figure out, why is the
meaningless.
shtar
Okay.
meaningless?
Because
again, אני
אין
לא
לזה
יכול-
חשיבות
I
יותר.
can't keep it in my house because אסור לשהות שטר פרוע בתוך ביתו. You're not going to want to hold on to it because it
Am I
might
gonna-
fall and come back to me. עכשיו, it's not worth anything. ממילא תנקמה holds, even if the malva carries it פטור.
אוקיי.
רבי יהודה סובר, אין כותבין שובר, and therefore, you paid me back the money. כבר שילמת על ה-money to me.
אבל למה
You're
לא?
going to come back to me and say, I don't want a שובר from you. And I could demand, you could demand, אני רוצה השטר בעצמה.
Why?
If
What's
I
the
don't
difference?
if I don't give you back the shtar, what are you going to say? Give me back my money. I only paid you back the chiyuv that I owed you based on the fact that you were going to return to me the shtar. If I cannot return the shtar to you, what's the halacha? I'm going to have to give you back your money, which means that shtar for the malveh is very important.
אוקיי.
Because if I can't find it, if I don't know where it is, I'm going to have to give you back the money you paid me.
I lose the
and
money.
Memela, if I carry that on Shabbat, it does have chashivut and you are chayav for
Of
hotza'ah.
course.
So the machloket between them really
צריך
is,
שובר או לא צריך שובר?
is there, exactly, kotvin shovar, lo kotvin shovar. Are you allowed to write a shovar now? Let's read that inside. Says Rava, Rava Amar, Dekuli alma mode b'shtar shektavo, top of Ayin Tet Amud Aleph. Rava Amar Dekuli alma mode, everybody agrees, b'shtar shektavo, regarding a shtar, that the Lova said, I wrote it, I agreed to it. שצריך לקיימו. הוא היה גם צריך לקיים את זה. Meaning, and therefore, he wouldn't be chayav al pi diburo if it's peshas aveshet, everybody would agree. That's not the case over here. The case is where normal Eidim were there. And the Lova paid back his debt. V'achra bekotvin shovar kamiflegi. The machloket is, could the malva write a receipt for the Lova? Tanakama savar, the Tanakama holds, kotvin shovar, that the malva is allowed to write a shovar. And memela, after you paid me, I could get you off my back by giving you a receipt. So therefore the shtar doesn't have any chashivut. And therefore if I would carry it accidentally on Shabbat, the malva, I would not be chayav. Rabbi Yehuda savar, en kotvin shovar, lo. You have to return it. And if you don't return the shtar chov, the lova will claim back his money, which means that that document has great value to me. It has chashivut. Since it has chashivut, Aiti chayav b'Shabbat if I carried it accidentally. Now, the first three explanations, Rav Yosef, Abaye, and Rava, all hold the debate is if the malva is carrying it. But the lova, anyways, he's not going to want to keep it, so there wouldn't be chashivut. Rav Ashi says no. The machloket here is if there's chashivut for the lova. Actually, that's the nikuda. And it's similar to what we mentioned before. Rav Ashi Amar, mipnei shetzarich la'arato leba'al chov sheni. Really, the pshat is the lova would have chashivut in a shtar paruah. Why would he have chashivut for him?
To show is the
Because
honesty.
he wants to show I pay up my debts.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because it's like building credit.
Better.
When you pay back your debts, you can show people, look, yeah, I have a track record
It's
of
reliable.
honesty. And it's like today in America also, how do you build credit? By having debt and paying back debt. So it's the same thing here. Rabbi Yehuda holds there's chashivut for the lova in that shtar chov after you paid it back. Why? Because then you could show another creditor. Ta'amar le, chazikava de parana. You see, I'm a person who pays back his debts. So the point is, it's not for the mal. We're talking about the lova actually. So Rabbi Yehuda holds the lova has chashivut in this because he could keep it in the future and show other people, lend me money. How do you know I'm trust? Look, I paid back my debts. Tanakama says, no, that's not important for him, and therefore he wouldn't want to hold on to it because it might end up falling out of his hands, going to the malva, and therefore it's not considered chashuv, and therefore he wouldn't be chayav for hotza'ah. Let's move on. Or kedei la'asot kemei. Amarnu b'mishnah, how much or does a person have to carry in order to make a kemeya? Remember, there's a machloket in the Rishonim, if it means the parchment for the kemeya or the wrap around the kemeya. But either way, let's just keep it at that. or kedei lasot kemeya. That was the shiur the Mishnah gave. Now what is or?
Leather.
Leather. Or, we're going to see later, it's leather that has been partially processed. Dainu, mazot omeret, it's not klaf. Klaf is fully processed. Or is partially processed. How much partially, we're going to get to later in the sugya. But or is kedei lasot kemeya, that's its function, memela, that would be the shiur to be chayav hotzah Shabbat. Okay, now, Rava is going to ask Rav Nachman 4 sheilot, and it's going to clarify this geder of or kedei lasot kemeya.
So you still have a usage in case you say that if it's not.
Exactly.
Process enough to have a usage.
Otherwise
it might be a little bit more, the majority of the or.
Although I want to speak out something for a second, we're going to see over here that you could be chayav in this measure of lasot kemeya, even if it hasn't been processed yet. Dainu, if it's something that is omed to be processed, or even not omed to be processed. Omed meaning that...
עומד, אתה מדבר עברית או באנגלית?
בעברית. Omed, meaning mazet.
Ready to.
It's meant for that, or it's going to be used, or even if it's not going to be used for that, but it could be used for that, it's going to be the same shiur of hotza'ah. That's what we're going to get into now. That's what Nachman's going to explain to Rava. So let's... So Rav asked Rav Nachman the following question. So he asked him, this is what you would call in English a softball question. What's a softball question? Sometimes in interviews, you want to lead up to another question, so you ask a simple question. So
you start a conversation, so you build up a question
exactly.
in order for to get to the subject. In soccer,
prepare me the ball for the big...
Exactly. Why? Because this we know the answer to. We just said, the Mishnah says, how much or do you have to carry? So Amalei Nachman said back, it's like our Mishnah says. These are Moraim, they knew the Mishnah. This wasn't the discussion.
But it's funny because the other guy, the other Amora went, Rav Yehuda, I think, he went to him and he was happy, so he was able to use the time and just ask him all these questions. Like they couldn't.
Oh, but that was
like they had some respect.
That was a different.
They had respect, so they had to use the moments in order for them to get like.
Okay, you'll see why it's no good. Let's see. So he said, Rav asked Rav Nachman, "Amotzi or bekama? How much or to be chayav for carrying on Shabbat? Amalek editan or kedei lasot kemeya." Clearly, the Mishnah says the amount to make an amulet, to make a kemeya. That's the shiur to be chayav for carrying or. Okay, so Rav said a second question. Hama abdo bekama. Okay, how much leather do you have to do the melacha of ibud orot? Maze ibud orot? Tanning leather. Tanning leather. This is not a hotza'ah question. How much leather does he have to do the melacha of ibud orot, which is
to be chayav beibud?
To be chayav for ibud orot on Shabbat. How much leather? So Rav Nachman said back, Amar le lo shna. This is why he started with the first question. It's the same thing. Meaning, the same shiur to be chayav for hotza'ah of or is the shiur of the amount to be chayav for ibud orot. Lasot kemeya.
Okay.
So it's the same measure for hotza'ah of or to be chayav for ibud orot of or. Okay, fine.
Because the minimum measurement to be chayav yotzi or.
Lasot kemeya. Okay. Question number 3. Le'abdo bekama. Oh, az achshav kacha. If he has leather that's hasn't had ibud done yet, and he carries that, he carries it on Shabbat, and it is something, this is a little bit unclear in the Rishonim, but let's just go like this, that he intends to do ibud too. It's or that will, there's different ways the Rishonim learn, either he umitkaven lasot ibud, or it's something that will have it done, but either way.
Okay.
How much leather would he then have to carry on Shabbat to be chayav? And what would you say? You hear it? This is a different question. The first question
it's just not processed, so here is like
let's go through the 3 just to get the steps. Question 1 was, how much or do you have to carry to be chayav on Shabbat? Kedei lasot kemeya. Question 2, how much leather do you have to do ibud orot to be chayav for ibud orot on Shabbat?
The same amount of to be motzi.
Lasot kemeya. Question 3 is, you're carrying orot with the intention that this or will be me'aved. So how much do you have to carry if it's something that's omed for ibud?
Maybe it's depending if it's string or change the size by the process.
Amar le lo shna.
אין הבדל.
He said אין הבדל. It's אותו דבר. So Nachman answered all three questions, it's the same thing. אז עכשיו, what's the...
הוצאה, עיבוד, ומה שהולך להיות מעובד.
Exactly.
אותו
All
size.
of them are the same.
Okay.
So now, according to this, let's just speak that out. Rav Nachman is teaching us whether the orot have already been processed
Or going to...
or will be processed, it's the same measure. זה אותו שיעור.
כן.
וזה חידוש.
למה? לא
Oh.
חידוש.
Oh, why? I'll tell you why. Because one could argue that maybe
זה לא מוכן.
it should be a different shiur.
String,
Different shiur.
maybe string.
This is less chashuv. This is less important. So maybe it has to be a larger measure to be chayav. You could argue that.
What kind of usage I have it if it's not processed?
Come up with something. We're going to talk more about that later. But the point is, you see, even if it's just omed le'abed, it hasn't even been processed at all yet, it's still the same geder of la'asot kemeah. Kedei la'asot kemeah. Ze ha'chidush. Whether it is processed or it's not
יש לזה
processed,
חשיבות.
but intending to process, it's also chashivut of the same measure.
יש לה חשיבות פחות מהאור המעובד,
Exactly.
אבל פה החידוש אומר שאפילו שזה לא מעובד, רק שיש לו פוטנציאל להיות מעובד, או אני חושב לאבד אותו, יש לו אותו דין מבחינת גודל כמו של אור מעובד כבר.
Exactly. Exactly.
לא שנה.
So says Rabbi to Rav Nachman, umenat temra. How do you know? Meaning,
מבינה?
umenat temra. כאילו, מאיפה
מאיפה
אתה
אתה
יודע
אומר?
את זה? How do you know that if it's meant to be processed, it is the same measure as if it was processed? מאיפה יש לך ראיה, we're going to bring a good ראיה right now in a minute, that the same shiur for hotza'ah is given whether it has been processed or it will be processed in the future. זה אותו שיעור.
יכול להיות מהאלים המודמים שהיה על כיסת המשכן?
What do you mean?
אבל אתה אומר
היו
קמע
לוקחים את זה
קטן.
מהאורות של עשוי עיבוד של האורות
אורות
של
נחשים.
כיסוי.
אז מה?
אולי מזה?
Well, what's the right?
לא, כאילו שזה לא שינה. I think so if it doesn't change, after the price doesn't change, the size doesn't shrink, that's why it's the same thing. Because if it's shrink, it's a little bit more problem. If I take a piece of leather like that, unprocessed, and I press and become like that smaller, then maybe it's not going to be the same deal.
As we're going to see later, Rav Nachman, the reason for his shita, I want to explain the reason, and then we'll see the raya. Raya is going to be a Mishnah, we'll see in a minute later. But the reason for his shita is because Rav Nachman holds, Rav Nachman sover, שזה חשוב לבן אדם לעשות עיבוד אפילו ל-leather the size of לעשות קמע. דהיינו, אדם מטריח to process leather that's not yet processed, even if it's only the size of כדי לעשות קמע.
למה?
הבנת את זה אבל? That's why, even if it hasn't been processed yet, it already has חשיבות.
Makes a lot of sense.
And therefore, processed, unprocessed is the same. זה אותו דבר, הבנת את זה? יש חשיבות לבן אדם לעשות הטרחה to process leather in a small size לעשות קמע.
Okay.
He's going to go through that tircha. Memela, even if it hasn't been processed yet, it's already given chashivut in that chumrah, in that small amount.
That's
the logic. So the Gemara says, where do you know this from? Where do you see a raya and shas for this idea? Says the Gemara. Whether it's unprocessed or processed, it's the same measure. זה אותו דבר.
We learned it already? No.
Well, it's later. Kufei Amud Bet. Umenat temra. Where do you know this from? Kedetanan, the Mishnah says later, on Kufei Amud Bet, hamelaben. Laben is when he washes the wool after cutting it off. It's whitening it. V'aminat petz is combing or disentangling it. V'hatzovea, dyeing it. V'hatoveh, spinning it. Shiuro kimlo rochav asit kaful. Sit is the distance between the middle finger and the second finger. That's how Rashi learns. V'aman etzba. It's the distance between the middle finger and the second finger. So sit kaful is double that distance. The amount, I guess double that distance, exactly. Double that distance. If a person would do any of these four melachot with material, double that distance, uchayab b'Shabbat. Okay?
4 inches, about.
Some משהו כזה. Ve'aoreg bet chutin. Now this is not nogeh, really, I don't want to get into it. But if he weaves 2 strings, shi'oro kimlo rochav asit. So then you're chayav, even if it was just 1 measure of a sit, meaning the middle finger to the second finger.
Not double.
Not double. We'll get more into that Bezat Hashem there, but the point is, even if the arev, the weft, the string coming down, doesn't go through all of the warp, you'll be chayav even as long as it was kimlo chavasit. I don't want to get into that right now. The point we're saying is like this. If the measure for tviyah is kimlo או חבסית כפול, זה השיעור לתביעה. איך זה גם יכול להיות השיעור למלבן או לצובע if that's earlier in the process? זה אותו שיעור. אתה נותן אותו שיעור למלאכת מלבן וגם למלאכת תביעה. אבל איך זה יכול להיות? It's earlier in the process, it's less חשוב. So what do you see from here? Alma, what do you see? Kivan de letvi'ah ka'i, since this is wool that is meant to you, it will be spun in the future. Shiura kitavoy. As the earlier melacha, when it's less chashuv, you could call it. It's the same measure of double asit. Hachinami says of Nachman, so it's the same thing here.
But people matriach.
Kivan de la'abdo ka'i, since this is leather, it's not processed yet, but it's meant to be will be processed. Shiro ki me'ubad, it's the same measure of me'ubad.
Yeah, but you said there is raya for what he said. Is reason for what he said. The logic because people machshiv small piece of leather, unprocessed, like they be matriach himself enough even to. So this is the proof that people melaben when a pet feel a small amount of. No, because this is your proof.
You're saying is the chaura. The way I said it, it would sound like that a person matriach to do all these earlier things, melabim and apet.
That's what I'm saying. Because this is your proof.
We'll speak that out later. Ken. Fine. So
this is your proof,
nice,
right?
Exactly. So what's the right? You see that even if it's unprocessed or processed, the same thing. Ze oto davar. Okay. Now. Rav asked one more question, one more sheila. V'shelo la'agdo bekama. Okay, so let's say it's leather, והוא לא מתכוון לעשות עיבוד עם זה. אז עכשיו מה? מה היית אומר?
מה? מה השאלה?
זה לא לעיבוד. לא לעיבוד. Meaning, it's leather that he's not מתכוון to do עיבוד, just a piece of leather. Stop. So now what's the measure for הוצאה?
But if I have a usage for that, there is chashivut.
That's the question.
If I'm not looking to be ma'abedet or leather, but I'm still going to have a usage, there is chashivut.
אבל עדיין הוא עומד. עדיין הוא עומד. If one day I change my mind.
So Nachman says the same thing. It's the same.
למה? כי one day gonna change your mind. You need a piece of leather to make a kiss.
I want to just emphasize that. It's
unnecessarily have to be מעובד.
No, it's not מעובד.
אבל חבר'ה, תשמע. זה אותו דבר אם you could do עיבוד.
מה שאמרת בהתחלה.
If something happened that you can't do עיבוד anymore,
that's a different story.
But since you could still
הוא עדיין עומד בפוטנציאל.
it has the חשיבות of like the עיבוד was done.
But it's applied for so many things that there is a potential.
No, we're talking about to make a kiss לקמע.
I get it, אני מבין, אבל you know there is so many things that have a potential to be something processed that it's basically changed their status from לא חשוב to חשוב.
Exactly.
So that's the class?
לכאורה אתה יכול לקח הרול הזה and you could probably apply it elsewhere. It's very interesting. מאחר שזה עומד לעשות עיבוד ואז יש חשיבות, you can also say the same thing. Now the only thing I will say as a clause is you also have to be that you'll be matriach with that raw leather, even in that small size, which Rav Nachman is going to speak out in a minute.
That's the whole point here.
If you don't have that, so then it has to have a larger shield because it's not chashuv like that.
Exactly.
So that we'll have to see. Now, what Rav is going to do is going to ask 3 questions against this yesod. So Rav Nachman's yesod is whether it's unprocessed or processed, ze oto shiur. Yesh leze oto chashivut, and therefore it's going to be chayav for hotzah in the same measure kedei lasod kameya. Rav is going to bring 3 mekorot, 3 sources in Mishnayot and Braitaot that seem to say that's not true. Let's see.
Oh, what? Rav going to makshe?
Rav is going to ask 3 kashas against him. Let's see. Says Rav velo shani ben me'ubad l'sheino me'ubad. Is it true that there is no difference between if it was processed or if it was processed? In both of them, the measure is kedei lasod kameya etevei. Question number 1. The Braita says, "Hamotzi samanim shvuyin kedei letzboa behen dugma le'ira." How much samanin shvuyin? Achshav, we're going to speak about 2 different things. Samanin is herbs. Grasses.
Not the one that you used to put in the oven? That
not for cooking.
White.
I'm not cooking.
No, the one that gets white. What's the name of those? That you put in the oven and make it white. מלבן אותם.
like a cleaner? לא יודע מה זה, אבל samanin is herbs that they would use for dyes, לצבוע. So, how much dyes to carry on Shabbat להיות חייב for הוצאה? So the Braita says, המוציא samanin shvuyim. If they were already shvuyim.
לא, זה עונין של פשטן, sorry.
Okay. המוציא samanin shvuyim. If it was already shvuyim, meaning the process of, you have to first take the color out of the esev. So if it was already soaking in the water to remove the color into the water, how much would you have to carry to be chayav of this on Shabbat? Kedei litzboa bahen dugma. The people that used to sell clothing, exactly, painting's a good example too, is they would color a little piece of cloth.
So I can get the idea of the color.
A dugma, it's not swatch in English, but it's a model, or a sample. So enough of that dye has to be in the water that you can use it to color a sample. It's a very small amount. It's not a lot. Le'ira, which is the same as le'ira.
Even grass, you take few of them, you just make it like this and you get
exactly. I don't want to get into this too much, but le'ira is a weaver's bobbin. I had no idea what that was. I looked it up. A weaver's bobbin is, remember the picture of the loom? Remember the picture of that sheti va'are, the erev, that thing? So the strings that are coming down.
Bet anirim?
So what it means is they used to have a tube, a kanel, like a tube. They would put the strings that were coming down. The ones coming down were called sheti, Ken? Sheti?
Sheti va'erev ze
yashar. I just want to make sure I'm saying this right. Was le'ira's erev, excuse me. No, erev was the ones coming down. Sheti was the ones from one beam to the other, and the erev were the ones coming down. When they came down, they used to put the strings through this tube so that it wouldn't get mixed together, it wouldn't get tied together. They would make a little hole at the bottom of that tube so the strings could come out very straight.
Okay.
So the amount, that's just the way that the Braita is telling us how much dye you're chayav for carrying if it was steeped already, if it was soaked, is enough to color a dugma, which is the same as the amount to fill in that hole, that little hole that they would make in this tube. It's a very small amount. Rashi speaks that out. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says, is to seal up that hole. Let's not focus too much on it. It's not
but
really
is it
to
close it or is it to color it?
The stone. No, to close it. It's nothing to do with color. It's giving you two different ways to understand the same shiur. It's to color a sample, or to seal up this hole, which is in the oreg process. Okay. Fine. This is very small, but bekitzer, it's a very small amount. Let's just get that clear. Fine. Oh, the problem is, what do we see? 1 second. Sorry. Oh, that's where it's dyes that have already, the herbs have already
inside
been soaked.
The water.
But when it comes to these herbs that have not yet been soaking, meaning it's earlier in the process, so now the Mishnah Peitet Mudbet tells us, if it's the shells of nuts or the shells of pomegranates, satis, safflower, upua, or madder, these are different types of materials they use for dyes. Now, if you carry these things on Shabbat, enough to color a garment that they used to put on top of a woman's hat. The Nashim used to wear on the top of their hat a little garment, a little piece of colorful material. Now that is a larger amount than the amount given if the samanim were already shvuyim. So what is Rav saying to Rav Nachman? What you see over here is, if it's unprocessed, it hasn't yet gone through the process of soaking, the shiur is larger. Why is the shiur larger? Because tachlis, it's less chashuv. So what is the shiur then? The shiur is only for dyeing this material for the woman's hat. Mashenkin, if it's already been soaking farther along in the process, it's a smaller amount. So you see the chava, where it's not yet processed, there's more of a kula. It could be even a large. So the Kashi is asking now, how could you say that where the leather has not had ibud yet, it's the same as if it did have ibud? You see from here, whether it had, when it's gone through the process of soaking, we're more machmir. If it's not gone through the process, we're more mekila. It's a larger amount. So you see a stira to your shita? Everyone's good with me?
Because maybe people doesn't makpid on a smaller amount, doesn't matriach themselves, because he said the whole reason that for little leather.
That's excellent. But what do you have to know?
The amount, it's probably bigger than the amount that is soaked in water.
Exactly. Which is a kula. Means you're only chayav for a larger amount. Why? Because what's it useful for? The example we're saying is coloring, dyeing this piece of material.
So mishtamea that now the amount is not equal.
Exactly.
If it's gone through the process versus not.
So what? You wanted to tell me that Rava is taking the idea that the leather is processed and not processed is equal compared to the tzvaim,
exactly.
And they actually not equal processed or not processed because they soaked in water.
Exactly. So what's the difference? Yochai just said the answer.
The
answer is, we'll read it inside in a minute.
There is little
Let's
leather.
start with
Rabbi
leather.
said
It's easier to
people
start with leather to
matriach
understand.
themselves
With
to
leather,
a small one.
when it's unprocessed, Adam matriach atzmo to process even that small amount la'asot kemeya. As anachnu notim chashivut afilu to this smaller amount regarding hotza'av all. Masha'en ken there when it comes to dyes, a person would not be matriach to make that small amount of dye just to color a sample. If you have a dye, you'll use it to color that sample. Memela, it's given chashivut. But before you have the colorant, before you have it in the water, you're not going to go through the process just for that. Memela, it has to be a larger amount.
So there is no chashivut?
Yeah, exactly. The chashivut.
There is no potential.
Let's speak it out like this. The chashivut is talui if you're going to be matriach for that small amount. If you're not matriach only for that small amount, it's not given chashivut.
Lechatchila is not the same.
Exactly. We're going to go through two more kashas and answer the same idea. Let's read that inside. So the Gemara answers, Rav Nachman answered, Amar Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Lefi she'ein adam to'ech l'shot samanim letzvoa behen dugma li'ira. A person will not lechatchila go through the process to get dyes just to color that small amount of material. So memela, that's why if it's not yet soaking in the water, it would have to be a larger amount to color the garment of the woman's hat in order to be chayav. Says Rashi, Masha'en came when it comes to or, he will be matriach. We'll read that Rashi in a second, and therefore you're chayav even if it's unprocessed. Look at Rashi. She'en adam toreach. It's the last narrow line in Rashi. She'en adam toreach.
Okay.
ואם בא לשרותה שורה כדי פסבכה, אבל אור טורח אדם לעבד כדי קניה. That's the point, that's the nekuda. So let's read that back in the Gemara. Question number 2 of Rava. And we're going to bring another Mishnah that seems to contradict of Nachman. Same shakla kemat. V'arei zer'onei gina. Well, wait a second. Says Rava to Rav Nachman, question number 2. When it comes to the seeds of a garden, before he plants the seeds, meaning if you have seeds, again, yeshcha seeds from the nursery over there, before you plant them, Tanan the Mishnah Tzadi Amud Aleph is going to tell us how many seeds to be chayav for hotza'ah, for carrying them. Zeron egina pachot mikegogeret. It's a little bit less than a grogeret. Now that's a large amount. A grogeret of seeds, dried figs, it's a lot of seeds. No, it could be even 5 seeds. It's a little bit smaller. 5 seeds, smaller, but still it's
5 seeds is very small.
It's very small, but it's going to be large based on what we're about to say. So before you plant them, seeds by themselves, to be chayav for hotza'ah, is what we'll call a larger amount. But as we're going to see, after you plant seeds, Tanan the Mishnah Pei Amud Bet is going to teach us, zevel, when it comes to fertilizer. Now what is zevel used for? We put on the ground and then the seeds grow. V'chol hadak, or this fine sand, also somehow used in planting. Kedei lezabel bo, it's in order to fertilize. Klach shel kruv divrei Rabbi Akiva, 1 stalk of cabbage. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Now what is he saying? Kama zevel ata tzarich laotzi liot chayav b'Shabbat. So says Rabbi Akiva, zevel it's what they use for. It doesn't sound pleasant, but it's what they use for it helps the seeds grow.
Yeah.
So how much zevel for hotza'ah to be chayav on Shabbat? What is its chashivut? To put on 1 klach shel kruv. Now, mazeh klach shel kruv? 1 stalk, which means 1 seed. So this is really going to be the kasha. As you see, after it's planted, the shiur of chashivut is smaller. And the chachamim omrim kidei l'zabel krisha. They're just cholek. They say
so because it's processed now, it's less.
That's the kasha. That's exactly kasha. The Chachamim in that Mishnah are going to argue, they're going to say it's enough zevel, the zabel krisha is a leek. Krishim, it's a leek, it's a different vegetable, which is even less zevel. But what do you see from here?
But the zevel now get the chashivut, not the
that's
seed.
Excellent. The Gemara is going to say more than that though. But what do you see? You see, before it's planted, it has to be a larger amount because it has less chashivut. After it's planted, we say even one seed has chashivut. So the kasha is l'chaora, before it's processed and after, it should be different. Kasha Rav Nachman. The answer is exactly the same like we said before. Zoto davar. Ha'it marala amar papa had zriya had lo zriya. No, the difference is was it planted or not. You're not going to go to your garden to plant one seed. So mamela, if you're dealing with the raw seeds before they're planted, there's no chashivut unless there's more of them. What would you be matriach for? 5 seeds, or a handful of seeds, or almost a grogeret. That has chashivut. But once it's planted, even one stalk has chashivut, and that's different. Masha'enkin, like Rashi said, a person would be matriach to tan even a small amount of leather. Kedei la'asod kemeya. Final question. We really learned this already. V'arei tit, but we learned in the Mishnah regarding tit. There's a braita actually. Tit is clay. The nekami the ligvale, because before he mixes it with water, Tanya the Braita says, Modim chachamim l'Rabbi Shimon. Even though the chachamim give chashivut to smaller amounts, but they agree to Rabbi Shimon b'motzi shofchin. If a person carries wastewater, it's Reshut harabim sheshiuran b'revi'it. The measure is a revi'it. Va'avinan ba in the Gemara asks shofchin l'may chazu. What's the chashivut? What is it used for? Rabbi Yomi legabel ba'in et atit. It's to make clay. Ve'ilu, so we know before you make the clay, the chashivut is a revi'it. Ve'ilu batad gavle, but we know after you make the clay. Tanya, we learned in a braita earlier. Tit kedei la'asot ben pikur. Remember, it's enough to put the clay in the mouth of the crucible, which is the oven you heat up metal in, which is a very small amount. So you see, before the process and after the process is different. So the Gemara answers the same story. One
second, I just lost a bit.
The same shakudatari. Again, the Kasha Rava's third question against Rav Nachman is, we know when it comes to tit.
Before it's revi'it. Yeah. After it's smaller amount.
Much smaller. So the answer he says is
when it's become like a.
You're not going to go make tit just for pikur. Once you have tit, you're going to use it for pikur. So mamela, the chashivut for pikur is if you have the clay itself is going to have chashivut after the
when
fact.
It's already megubal.
It's already megubal, but before it's megubal, mayim will only have chashivut if it's a revi'it. Masha'enken, you will tan the leather in order to make a kameya.
The measurement is changed after the process, but with leather. Lo mshane process, not process, the same amount.
Because the person is matriach for that small amount to make the kameya. Okay, now the Gemara asks one more question.
Wow.
On this sugya. Good?
So many questions to Rav Nachman.
Yeah, exactly. Tashma, let's go to the final question. On Rav Nachman. I mean, this.
And he's standing still, huh?
Yeah, he kept the shita. Tashma dam Rabbi Yichia bar Ami mishmei deula. Yichia bar Ami said the name of Ula, and this is Amoraim. Now listen to this. There are 3 things that we call orot. Let me just speak this out for a second, and we'll see it inside. When they make or, the final product, the 4th thing we're not mentioning here is called klaf.
Mm-hmm.
No, the 4th thing is called klaf.
The 4th
klaf is we use for sifrei Torah v'chulei. But before that, there's 3 types of things we call orot, but really they're all unprocessed. Dainu, they're all earlier in the process. Now there were 3 materials they used to treat the orot with. There was salt, there was flour, meliach, kamiach, and afitz. Afitz is what's in English it's called gall nuts. It's a certain nut that they would make juice out of it and treat it to make it like darker.
Flour also?
Meliach, kamiach, afitz. Salt it, flour and water, and then they would treat it with his gall nuts, it would make it like darker. Okay. So there's 3 types of orot. Each one is with one more of the steps, but not fully processed. So we're going to go through in this Memra, we're going to show what those 3 steps the leather would be called, and what its chashivut would be also for hotza'ah. Because what is it used for? It could be used for something in each of those steps, but what is the chashivut? So says the Braita, the Amar Bichia bar Ami mishmei de'ula, Shosha orot ten, there are 3 types of things that are orot. Matzah, one is called matzah. It's not matzah. It's called matzah. We'll see why. V'chipa v'diftera.
Maybe it's rough like matzah.
Sort of, exactly. So matzah, what is matzah? Kimashmao, like it implies. Velo meliach, velo kemiach, velo afitz. Meaning, you stripped it off the animal, but it wasn't yet treated with salt, with flour, or with his gallnut juice. So, how much is its shiur for Hotza'ah Shabbat? Tani Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yehuda, kedei latzo bo mishkolet ktana. In order to wrap a small weight. What does it mean? It means the people, when the mochim, they used to use in their weights, in their scales, they had weights on one side. So let's say this weight was 2 pounds. So then you put food on the other side and you sold by 2 pounds. By the weights were made out of lead, oferet, and lead was soft. So eventually, if it was touching the pans very many times, it would diminish. So they used to wrap it in this leather that was unprocessed.
So they can keep the weight.
So they keep the weight strong like it's supposed to be. So this matzah, this, you call it totally raw leather, was its minimum basic usage. Memela, the amount to wrap a mishkolet, that's going to be the chiyuv for Hotza'ah Shabbat. Very, very nice.
Very nice.
Says the Gemara, the Kama, how much is it? Meaning there's different kinds of weights. So how much weight would it have to cover? A quarter of pumpadita. Rashi says in pumpadita they used to use litra. So a quarter of the litra of pumpadita, that was the small weight that you could wrap this leather in to be chayav for carrying that amount of leather. That's the least. Now, that's a large amount, obviously. That's a large amount because it's the least chashuv of the things we're discussing. So it's a larger amount. Fine. Continues the Gemara.
אמרנו מליח, קמיח ואפיץ.
Chipa. Now what is chipa? This is the second type of oil. The meliach velo kemiach velo afitz. It was treated with salt. It was not treated with flour or gallnut juice. So it was one more step. The kamashiro, what's its measure? So this is actually what we spoke about in our Mishnah. Keditznan. What we spoke about in our Mishnah is chipa. Keditznan or kedei la'asot kemeya. They used to use leather at this stage of chipa for kemeya. So the amount to make a kemeya, that's the chashivut of chipa. Okay, beautiful. Diftera. Now, what is the chashivut of diftera? Demeliach v'kemiach v'lo afitz. So it's where it had salt and flour, v'lo afitz. By the way, klaf is where it had all of this stuff done.
So it's the step before that. It's they started from the raw, they went to the medium, and they went to the medium well, and they almost got to the well done.
Exactly. That's why we're not discussing klaf. Klaf is a different story. But diftera is the meliach v'kamiach v'lo afitz. The kamashiro, what's its chashivut? Kedei lechtov alav et haget. A get, divorce document. Mutar lecha lechtov et ze al diftera. Rashi says, why? This is the smallest of all the measures, because all you have to write in a get, al pi halacha, is gufo shel get harei at muteret lechol adam ushmo ushma ha'edim v'azman. Meaning it's very minimal. So each one of these is a smaller amount from the previous one. That's the end of the memra. Now, katani niat, what do you see that Ula is teaching us? Kedei latzur bo mishkolet ktana.
Smaller.
V'amar Abaye reva de pumpadita. What did we say in the beginning of the memra? We said, what chashivut is given to this matzah, the earlier, less processed, is a larger amount, which is to wrap the weight. Kasha is, but wait a second. Of Nachman, ata ba'atzmacha amarta, afilo im za unprocessed, it is the same shiur of kedei la'asot kemeya as if it is processed. So why is it that that's given a larger amount, which is a kula, even if it's an earlier step in the process? It seems to be a stira to Rav Nachman.
I'm sorry again.
המצה זה יותר גדול מהקמיה.
המצה יותר גדול.
הכמות של האור,
לעטוף את המשקולת.
כן, אתה צריך יותר אור מהקמיה, כי הקמיה זה קטן. והגט, ברור שזה יותר גדול.
לא, זה קטן יותר.
איך?
להלכה,
איך תרשום?
גט כשר, you can only have a few words. הרי את מותרת לכל אדם בשם שמו.
I guess the diphthera and kamea can be
on the same. No, they write it much bigger, obviously, but the minimum size, which is what diphthera could be used for, is much smaller. Each of these is smaller than the last.
But diphthera consider as a smaller amount compared to the
matzah.
Each one is small. Each one's a chumrah over the last. Even smaller, like liot chayav lo otzah.
Matzah.
So the kasha we're saying over here is matzah is the first one. It's the largest amount. That's the kasha. אבל אמרנו שבין אם processed or לא processed, מה השיעור? כדי לעשות קמע. אבל לעשות קמע זה חומרה, זה smaller.
But who knows what type of קמע?
As that's the kasha. Why is it לעשות for matzah? It's a larger amount.
Maybe this case.
You understand? I understand the question.
אבל maybe the קמע is interchangeable. It can be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller.
No. We're saying a different
Maybe here they don't hold by the omed.
Oh, okay. So that's.
They don't hold by the omed.
What's the pshat?
זה מצה, it's done, it's gonna be מצה forever like that.
So
and this, every process, we're not going to change never.
Now you change the measurement.
It's all, no, כל העניין שאמרנו, למה הוא אומר אותו דבר, בגלל שכל דבר, הוא אומר, זה לא מעובד, אבל יש לו פוטנציאל, או שאני אעשה, או maybe one day, all these things, מצה, always gonna be מצה. אין עומד. זה המצב וזה ככה יישאר כל הזמן.
זה הפרוסס שהוא עובר?
הוא יעמוד ככה.
זה הפרוסס שהוא עובר.
עשית לו מצה?
לא עשו לו כלום בעיבוד שלו.
לא, במצה נגיד עשית עיבוד של מצה, עטפת את המשקולת, you never ever gonna open it, make it to the next level. It's always gonna say מצה. מה שאין כן במה שאמרו בהתחלה.
So the Gemara is not going to say like that, meaning not that it's permanently like this, but in its current state, you can't do עיבוד אורות with it. What does it mean? Orot, when you start off with them, they're wet.
You can't stop in the
they're
middle.
Wet, they're lach.
They're מתקשים.
They're lach. They're
yeah.
wet. You can't tan it when it's lach. First, it needs to be miyabesh. It needs to dry out.
Okay.
After it dries out, now you could start the process and make it meliyach, kemiyach.
Okay.
The pshat we're going to say here is like this. This thing that we're calling matzah is where it's still wet.
Okay.
Since it's still wet, אתה לא יכול לעבד את זה. Since you're not able to do ibud yet, until it dries out. Now it doesn't have chashivut based on ibud. So it only has chashivut based on some, what is the other thing?
The before.
But if it was dried out, since it's omed, right now, it's not yet ibud, but it could be for ibud, it's already given chashivut of ibud. Let's read that inside. Hatam, Reb Nachman says back, hatam bebishula. Bishula here doesn't mean cooked, it means wet, Rashi says. If it's still wet, it's given a different chashivut. But if it's dried out, even if you don't intend to use it for ibud, but you could do ibud, that point, az halacha that it would follow ibud. Final question. And the problem is, we had a Mishnah Masechet Kilim, which we mentioned earlier, legabe hilchot tum'ah. Remember we learned, in terms of garments, so you need a certain size for the garment, for the beged, to be chayav, to be tameh. So what does it say? Ha-beged shlosha limidras. In order for a beged to be mekabel tum'ah, it has to be 3 by 3 tfachim for midras. Midras is if a zav lies on it or sits on it. A sak, what is sak? Is sackcloth. It's a rough material, so it's less important. So it has to be more. It has to be a dalad 4 by 4. Now this is going to be the kasha. Ha-o. חמישה על חמישה. ומה זה אור? Leather. מה זה חמישה טפחים? That's much larger than anything we've been talking about.
זה קבלת טומאה, זה לא אבל הוצאה.
רגע. This is for קבלת טומאה.
נו.
מפץ וו על וו, which is a reed mat.
כן.
בין למדרס, finishes off the Mishnah.
המחצלת.
Whether it's for מדרס, בין למת, or for טומאת מת. ותניא עלה, and the Braita teaches on that Mishnah, הבגד והשק והאור, כשיעור לטומאה, כך שיעור להוצאה. The same shiur for Kabbalat Tumah is the shiur for Hotza'ah. This is, Rav Nachman, it's very difficult for him now. Rav Nachman is saying for Yibud Orot, a small amount. Here saying it's 5 by 5 tfachim, it's much more. It's a mapshat. So the answer is, Hahu bekortuvla. That's what Yochai was trying to say before. Kortuvla means they would boil the oil when they used it for furniture. What they would do is they would boil it. Mevashlim et ha'orot kedei litkashot et zeh, or make it hard for furniture. So if the leather was boiled and it became hard, you can't use that anymore for ibud orot, for kemeya. It's not useful for that anymore. So memela, now it's given chashivut based on furniture. What's the chashivut for furniture? Chamisha tvachim. Masha'enken. If you haven't done that yet, so it would even have chashivut lasot kemeya, because that's what it's made to be used for. So bekitzu, what we're coming at is like this. When you're dealing with orot, and you haven't done anything to it yet, if it's moist, if it's wet still, so its chashivut is for mishkolet, because that's all it's really useful for now. If it's dried out, so Rav Nachman says it doesn't make a difference if it's processed or not processed. It's the same measure, kedei la'asot kemeya, unless it already had this bishul done. Because if bishul was done for furniture, it's hard. It's now useful for furniture.
It's freeze the situation. It's freeze the status.
And now it's useful for furniture. And what's the chashiv of furniture? Chamisha tfachim.
בתורת יוסף. תודה רבה בורא עולם. הקדוש ברוך הוא מזכה אותנו חודש טוב, בשורות טובות, מלא ברכת השם.
חודש טוב, בשורות טובות. ביי ביי, חזק וברוך.